For the record, today is Tuesday, December 11th, 2007. We are at the Charlevoix Public Library in Charlevoix, Michigan, working on the Charlevoix Oral Traditions Project. I am Judith Ivan, Assistant Adult Services Librarian. Helping me with the interviews today is videographer Rick Pierpont of Pierpont Productions in Harbor Springs, Michigan. Well, let's start with you and your story. Where were you before you joined the service?
Chicago.
In Chicago.
Yeah.
And what were you doing in Chicago?
I was raised there.
Okay. That was your
I was
home?
raised there. That was my home, and I was working with American Airlines at Midway Airport. Of course, that was the only airport then in Chicago. Then the Korean War came up, and my hobby had always been electronics, radio or electronics, shortwave radio or electronics. And I guess it was a matter of really going in the Army and toting a gun, or going in the Air Force and getting in an electronic career field, which they promised me. Okay. And since electronics was brand new in the Air Force, why there was a 100% chance I was going to get in it. So
you enlisted then?
I enlisted in the Air Force.
In the Air Force. Okay.
1950.
And did you get your training?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Went to basic training, and we did not even finish out our basic training. The urge was so bad to get people trained in their career fields that they put us on a train and shipped us all to Biloxi, Mississippi for training.
For the electronics training?
Yeah. So I spent just about a year in Biloxi. Came out of there, and that started me on 19 years of living on the local economy, because I was assigned to an outfit with mobile radar equipment, and we were never stationed on a base.
Wow.
My first assignment was in Oklahoma City, and we were set up on a corner of a golf course. So we lived locally on the local economy. We were lucky there in Oklahoma City because we had a YMCA downtown. But it was our job to get on the bus and get out to Southwest 29th Street and get to work.
And what were your responsibilities there? You say you set up on the corner of a golf course.
Okay, we at that time, this type of radar equipment was training bombardiers. Okay, simulated bombing runs.
Okay.
Some of it was navigation also, but most of it was simulated bombing runs. And so the entire 19 years, we were training bombardiers.
Okay.
What did you do specifically?
Radar maintenance. Started out, we basically had a radar trailer which was tied into a computer trailer with a plotting board, and it was very, very, very accurate method of determining where they would have dropped a simulated bomb and where it would have hit. Very, very accurate. It really amazed me because not only then were we doing radar maintenance, but we had to maintain the computer part also.
Which was pretty, was that difficult to do back then?
No, once you got the hang of it, why, you went, the entry level is what they call the 3 level. You were just like a journeyman. And then throughout the years you had to progress up to the 5 level, and you got more and more as you went along. Training and learning how to maintain it. And we not only did the maintenance, but we had to also operate the radar. We were radar maintenance operators and plotting board operators. And of course we had to communicate with the aircraft too, so we had our radios that we communicated with the aircraft. But lived on the local economy. We had to go get our own meals, which was, there was a restaurant right across the street from the golf course, a little mom and pop restaurant. And of course, they were glad that we were there, because generally the sites, we had generally anywhere from 80 to 120 people at a radar site.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was just about to ask that question, how many
Yeah.
were involved?
Well, that was the beginning, just about 80. Later on, years later, why we started another process during their simulated bombing run, where they had to locate signals, electronic countermeasures. In other words, we had more vans come in then. It was another entirely different career field, but it was in the electronic career field. And these electronic countermeasure guys would send out possibly 4 signals at a time, let's say, I'm not sure. And the electronic countermeasures officer then on the aircraft had to jam, you know, send a signal out to jam those signals. So then a radar site was not only the radar bomb scoring, the simulated bomb, but electronic countermeasures also.
And did you ever go to Korea or to do any of this
No,
training? No,
I did not make it to Korea, even though our group, we were little what they called detachments.
Okay.
And then we had a group headquarters. They did send 1 or 2 radars over to Korea, and instead of telling the aircraft making simulated bomb runs, they reversed the process, and we directed the airplane where to come in and told them where to drop the bomb to hit the target. So back in Korean War days, that was tried, and I don't think to a large measure, but it did work in the little bit that they did in Korea.
Okay.
So this would come back later on and get us to Vietnam.
Oh, okay.
So how many bombardiers did you work with? I mean, how long would their training sessions be? A couple months at a time, or?
The bombardiers?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, I don't know anything about them, but they were rated also as to, let's say, just the beginner. And there were several methods of how the aircraft would bomb. Visual, which was old World War II days, visual. But the big thing then was radar, using radar to find their target and determine where to drop their weapon. So they, just like any other air crew, they were a beginning crew that got put together, and they had to work their way up the ladder to lead status, okay? And so, yeah, a B-52 might take off from Spokane, Washington, and in a day's time, they would hit several different radar sites. Okay. And you know, they plan their missions ahead of time. And maybe in a 24-hour period after refueling a couple times where they'd finally get back home. Okay. But they were constantly training. There was a big thing then that train, and we had we were assigned to the Strategic Air Command. And the boss in Strategic Air Command was tough. He took no excuses. You either performed or you
or you were shipped. You
instead of being a bombardier, you probably became a navigator.
So did you stay in Oklahoma that whole time?
No, I stayed in Oklahoma until probably 1956, and I then got my first overseas tour, and believe it or not, all places, French Morocco was French Morocco at the time. Moroccans were fighting the French for their independence. I mean, not really, you know, not a lot of fighting, but yet there was, you know, like today you'd call them terrorists. And they were trying to win their independence from the French. The French, it was actually French Morocco. So, and I don't know if you ever heard of Marrakesh.
Marrakesh?
Marrakesh.
Marrakesh, yeah.
Yeah, well, we were, it was sort of in the southern part of Morocco, down south. It was, they called it the Paris of Africa. Okay. And Winston Churchill spent his winters there, and it was a resort town. Okay. Very nice resort town.
Right on the ocean?
No, inland.
Inland?
Inland. Inland. It was like an oasis in the desert. Okay. But it had a ski resort because the Atlas Mountains were just to the south of us there, and there was snow on the Atlas Mountains. So French people came in to do their winter skiing, besides going, I guess, to the Swiss Alps, where they always, somebody found time to come and go skiing in the Atlas Mountains there. But we were stationed there on a corner of a French Air Force base again. Wow. Just a little corner of a French Air Force base. Had to live on the local economy. Now that was hard. In a way, it was a lot of fun too, because our nearest Air Force base was 40 miles to the north. And because of the fighting going on in probably the first year I was there, why they were restricted to the base a lot, and here we're right in town living with them. But I think of all the cities I've been to, it was beautiful. The trees, or the streets, were lined with orange trees. Wow. Basically, when I got my family over there, why we were able to rent a villa, and we had a maid. I can remember her name yet, Shuma. And I was lucky because she spoke English and her husband spoke English. Her husband had been to America as a Boy Scout. Wow. And he spoke good English, and he worked on the Air Force Base 40 miles to the north. And we didn't get around too much traveling around the country. it was pretty hard because
was it particularly safe, or were there not many roads, or?
Well, there seemed to be one road between Marrakesh and Morocco, and you had to share that a lot with camels and donkeys and everything else. But once we had established our little villa there and had a maid, she showed us how to shop. She did the shopping. And I mean, they don't just go into a grocery store and shop. They go to the market, and you have to learn how to barter. If you don't barter with them, they feel you have abused them.
Jeez.
Yes, they do. They do not like for you to walk up and say, well, I'll take a dozen eggs. Yeah. You got to haggle over the price. And so we we let her do the haggling. Yeah. We watched her though, and it was funny. It was funny. And she sort of briefed us on everything as to what you should do and what you shouldn't do to get along. But
what were some of the things that you shouldn't do that would have offended people besides not bargaining?
Like one thing, if she worked late up into the night, I would take her to the gate. We couldn't go in the native part, the walled part of Marrakesh at night. And so I would take her up to the gate. Number one, she could not ride in the front seat. That was a no-no. Wow. Ooh. She'd probably get herself beat up by Moroccan men for having been in the front seat. She had to ride in the back.
Is this a Muslim culture?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And she had to have her veil. She didn't wear a veil when she worked with us. Yeah. But once outside, we had a wall around our villa also. Okay. And she had to definitely ride in the back. We were restricted from going in there, I say, but some friend of Shuma's was getting married. And my wife wanted to go to the wedding, and Shuma wanted to take her. So we had to dress my wife up like Shuma in order to get past, because the Air Force base, that base 40 miles, it was provided sort of like security. You know, they had patrols, security police, watching the guys that they didn't get in trouble. Well, she made it into a wedding. She went to a Moroccan wedding.
Well, good for her. That must have been a wonderful experience.
Oh yeah. I never tried. It didn't bother me. I never was interested in the native part of the city anyhow. And
did you get to know the culture at all? You know.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. They, as far as I can say, they were wonderful, wonderful people. I'll never forget. They finally, after about 1 year there, the Moroccans did win their independence, and then everything was much more relaxed then. And it was more sightseeing than that we got out. I think we got up to we went up to Casablanca probably one time and shopped around Casablanca. And my one son was born over there up at an air base near Casablanca. So taking him to the doctor, why, it was almost a 4-hour drive. Wow. Just to get up there. And boring. Like I said, yes, you almost had to be careful and make sure there was a lot of, sometimes camels running free, you know, herds of camels, and you had to be, that was.
So how long were you there in Morocco?
3.5 years.
3.5 years.
3.5 years in Morocco.
And then?
Then I came back to, of all places, Joplin, Missouri. And we had, again, living on the local economy. Joplin was a pretty good town. And I enjoyed it there, and but then our outfit started getting a little more than just mobile radars. They had to go and take and put all these vans on flatbeds on a train. Okay?
Yeah.
On a train. We had in the Air Force 3 18-car trains.
Wow.
With this radar equipment on it. It had a dining car. It had a boxed car where you always had one guy that was doing maintenance on the railroad equipment, on the just strictly railroad rather than radar maintenance. And I'm not sure you had, we did have living quarters there. We had a dining car and a mess car, or a mess car and living quarters. And so this started what they call TDY. I mean, they would take, like we were out here at Bayshore, had a radar station in Bayshore, that's how I got up here. You man this railroad train by taking people from probably 20 different radar sites and send them temporary duty for 90 days there. So all of a sudden, we're starting to get a lot of temporary duty. In a year's time, some people might have been gone from home 6 months out of the year. About the same time, somebody came up with the idea, if you recall back in the 50s and early 60s, everybody was worried about Russia, and so all your big cities, Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, I'm just naming the ones that were in our area, had these Army missile Nike